very, very short window.
Yes, motion to adjourn debate on this motion is in order. Did you call it?
Call it, please, and
Okay,
I'd like
we
to
have a
request that I
motion.
would get the last minute or two.
We have a motion from Ms. Cirillo to adjourn debate on the motion currently introduced. Record a vote on the motion of Ms. Cirillo.
Mr. Fragascatos?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
No, we could have been voting on it
Mrs. Falk?
to make it
Nope.
happen.
Mr. Tochor?
Clerk, can you confirm that this vote is in order?
Yes.
What? It is?
It's in order.
Vote on.
Continue. There was a motion duly made to adjourn, and I called it.
So Mr. Tochor?
No.
No. Mr. Allison?
No.
Madame Chabot?
We,
Ms. Cirillo?
yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4, 4.
The motion has been adjourned. We'll now return.
While I was questioning the witness, I had a hard time hearing because the floor audio is so quiet in here and there was lots of chit chat all around. But when I put my earpiece in, there's that lag. So I just asked that either the room stay quiet or this gets fixed because it just was very, very distracting for me.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. I have using the earpiece, same as anybody else. I have it turned high enough that I can hear. People have the option of using the earpiece. That's your choice.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair, on this. It's not acceptable that there's a delay. And so that's the issue that and it's not even about interpretation. It's about hearing even within the same language that you might be
Ms.
speaking.
Gray,
And there's a delay. And so we actually can't hear
Thank you,
what the
Ms.
witnesses
Gray.
are saying. It's unacceptable.
The committee is operating under approved technology and hearing. So we'll return to the committee. Mr. Fragascatos and I'm still going to conclude with 5 minutes with Mr. Fragascatos, 2.5 minutes to Madame Chabot, and 2.5 minutes to Madame Cirillo, and then we will suspend. So, Mr. Fragascatos, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to witnesses for being here today. Mr. Richter, I'd like to begin with you. We did hear at the outset of the questioning when Ms. Gray put certain questions to you that, yes, we're having an extremely difficult time, like almost every other democracy is, with homelessness. I suppose there's two courses of action that a responsible party can follow. One is to simply identify the problems. The other would be identify the problems and actually propose solutions. So would you say, Mr. Richter, that any party that is serious about addressing homelessness would offer solutions to deal with homelessness and, in fact, would actually go as far as coming up with a housing plan that, at the very least, mentions homelessness? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. On that, and staying in that vein, $250 million has been proposed by the federal government in the most recent budget to address encampments. How do you think the best way to proceed would be with respect to encampments? How should that money be allocated to get to the best result?
I would, and I have been recommending to the government a housing-focused encampment response or housing-focused approach. I think that can be very effective in reducing encampments as we experience them today. I do think that this program has a lot of potential if it can be implemented quickly. It's going to be really important that this money get out the door as soon as possible in order to ensure that this is an encampment program for this winter and not next and the one after. But I do think it's important that, if you want to resolve encampments, we also need to be looking at slowing the flow of people into homelessness, which requires, some form of housing benefit. But as you suggest, also, it's very important to have that housing investment and that housing investment done quickly.
Also, Mr. Richter, you talked about, and Mr. Pomeroy, I'm going to come to you on this as well, sir, but you talked about the continuum of housing, starting with social housing and going all the way to home ownership. Just a few days ago, you would have seen the federal government made the largest investment in co-op housing in the past 30 years. How critical is co-op housing to addressing the overall housing crisis? It's one form of housing, and so I'm not making the case at all that this is the panacea, but we've heard some describe co-op housing as quote-unquote Soviet-style housing, and I think that going down that kind of path is not just negative. I think it misses the entire point. But where can co-op housing fit with respect to addressing the challenges, the crisis that we face in front of us?
I think cooperative housing is an essential element. I think that program was a very smart investment that'll continue to reap benefits for decades into the future. So I would say I'm strongly supportive of it. It's a form of attainable home ownership, and yeah, I would say it was a very good idea.
Mr. Pomeroy, the place of co-op housing in addressing the homelessness crisis, I noted that you talked about co-op housing in your testimony.
Yeah, I mean, basically co-ops, of all the social housing we've created in this country, about 20% are cooperatives. They're another form of non-profit, and I think any form of non-market housing is beneficial in terms of creating housing that's permanently affordable and immune to market pressures that push up rents. So absolutely, a co-op alongside non-profits are a critical part of making sure the supply includes affordable supply.
Thank you very much. There's a minute left. I'll cede time to Mr. Morris.
And
the chair, would it be possible to add this minute to a minute from Madame Chabot?
Madame Chabot,
Oh, une minute, alors c'est deux.
quickly. Madame Chabot, are you giving a minute to Mr.?
Je lui accorde une minute, pas plus.
Okay, d'accord.
Merci, Madame Chabot. Thank
1
you.
minute, no more.
Appreciate. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, and Louise aussi. Merci. Mr. Pomeroy, I really appreciate the research you've done to help us identify where the cause of the housing crisis is coming from. Of course, part of it is the loss of affordable housing across the country. Your most recent research shows that actually my community is losing the most units for every new affordable unit getting built. For every one new affordable unit getting built, we're losing in Waterloo Region, or Kitchener-Waterloo at least, 39 units. In your research, you talk about plugging the holes in the bottom of the bucket. I assume you're referring to the erosion of those affordable units. You've talked about rent controls provincially as one part of that. Can you talk about what more is needed? Some have talked about, for example, removing the tax credits or incentives that real estate investment trusts have access to. Can you speak about what needs to be done federally to plug the holes in this bucket?
Yeah, and just for clarity, I mean, this is data that compares the total number of units existing under $1,000 a month compared to the number of units built under affordable housing programs for each city. And certainly, Kitchener-Waterloo has the highest number. And in part, that's because of the change in the number under 1,000 has many units have moved above $1,000 a month. And also the number of units that have been created by Kitchener-Waterloo is less than in other cities. So that's how the ratio comes out of it. But absolutely, this loss, many of these units still exist, but they exist at higher rents. They exist at higher rents because there's very strong pressure on rental markets, because of high levels of demand coming both from new immigration and also from the fact that folks can't afford to own, so they stay in the rental market, and that puts pressure on the rental market as well. So we have these pressure points on the rental market pushing up rents in a regulatory environment that allows vacancy decontrol, and when units are turning over, the rents can go up quite dramatically, and we see monthly data from rentals.ca of rents going up 15, 18, 20% year over year. I mean, that's the key issue that's creating the affordability crisis. I think we temporarily need to take a look at vacancy rate decontrol mechanisms. But as I said earlier, that's not a federal jurisdiction. It's a provincial jurisdiction, and one that the federal government can only ask the provinces to take a look at.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Madame Chabot, pour 1 minute et 30.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Pomeroy. Several groups in Quebec, we heard it during a convention, said that we need as an objective of 20% of social housing when we look at affordable housing. And that's one of the proposals that that is being suggested. Right now, the non-market housing stock is at about 10%. So that would be an answer to the crisis, to have 20%. Are you in agreement with that proposal?
At the summit, the discussion was that 20% of the social housing should be 20% of all rental, as opposed to the total housing stock. But essentially, that means a doubling of the existing social housing stock, which is consistent with a report from Scotiabank last year, which suggested that Canada is half the OECD average, and we should try and double the size, which is the point Tim Victor made about 655 additional units. Correct.
Une autre problématique aussi, on parlait, en tout cas des provinces, je parlais du Québec où on a
Another problem that we had is that we had an agreement with Canada is that how can we be more nimble when it comes to housing programs to make sure that between the will, the money, and the idea that it wouldn't take 3 or 4 years for it to take place?
Processing problem. Many of these programs are loans-based, and the underwriting process is quite onerous. I think CMHC, in fairness, has accelerated the approvals process compared to the beginning of the National Housing Strategy. There's always room to do better.
Merci, Madame Chabot. Madame Zarrillo, for 2.5 minutes to conclude the first hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to ask my questions to Mr. Richter this time, talking about Alberta and talking about just the housing rental crisis that's happening in Alberta. And I'm thinking specifically about Boardwalk. And I wonder, Mr. Richter, if you could just share some of the things that are happening in Calgary and Edmonton around rental housing and homelessness, and if you believe that the business practices of corporate landlords is contributing to that.
Well, I can't speak to that specifically but I do know, I think it's important that we remember in the rental housing market, about 40% of the overall market is owned by real estate income, like the REITs, and 60% is owned by smaller companies and individual investors. So the real estate income trusts do have can play a significant role, but they only really have an impact, I would say, in an undersupplied or a market where there's very low, where there's really, really tight supply and very low vacancy. And if there's lots of supply, individual market players can, again, have less and less influence. But I will say, speaking specifically to Boardwalk, so prior to leading the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, I led the Calgary Homeless Foundation. And between 2008 and 2012, we housed about 4,000 people straight out of homelessness into permanent housing. And I know that's also true across Alberta. And we were able to create affordable housing and house those people in a lot of them in Boardwalk apartments. In fact, we were able to reduce homelessness in Calgary for the first time since we were able to count in the early 1990s, and we didn't. Alberta wasn't.
Mr. Richter, I'm going to have to cut you off. Is that possible again, do you think?
Impossible to reduce with?
To have someone like Boardwalk or different REITs to solve this homelessness problem quickly, to get people housed?
Yes.
And how would it do it?
Housing first.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move to something else, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move a motion, Mr. Chair. I know that this committee asked Starlight Investments, the CEO, to come to this committee, and we received back that they didn't have, it wasn't going to fit their schedule to come. And I think that it's maybe a misunderstanding from the CEO of Starlight Investments that this is a parliamentary committee and that we work for Canadians and that really we would like to have them here and we wouldn't want to have to summon them, but it seems that we are going to have to. So I have a motion, Mr. Chair, that will be shared, that pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A, the committee summon the CEO of Starlight Investments, Daniel Jimmer, to appear before the committee by June 20, 2024, to testify in relation to the study on federal housing investments for a minimum of 2 hours. And in light of the testimony that we just had, that they could be part of the solution, I think it's even more pressing. Thank you.
Okay, I've been advised by the clerk that because the motion is in reference technically to the study we're doing, that it does not require the 48 hours. So it is in order for Madame Cirillo. It is in order for her to move the motion. We come to the end anyhow, so I'll get back to the motion. I just want to advise the witnesses that this concludes the first hour of the testimony, so you're free to leave while the committee discusses the item currently before it. So, witness, thank you for appearing today on this important study.
Thank you very much.
With that, we have Madame Cirillo's motion, Mr. Fragas-Catos, and then Madame Chabot.
Just could I ask for a suspension for a few minutes, Chair?
Okay, 2 minutes, we'll suspend.
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais qu'on puisse recevoir cette...
I would like us to get this motion in writing, please, Mr. Chair, during this break. Ms. Mizzarello, could we have it in writing, please?
It is being circulated while we're in suspension. So we'll suspend for 3 minutes. Suspend. are now back in session. We are still in the public portion of the meeting, and Mr. Fragas-Catos, you had the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just to ensure that all of us are on the same page with respect to the request for Starlight to appear at the committee, what has been the correspondence from Starlight? What have they said about appearing and why they do not want to appear?
The letter was circulated to all committee members. Their reasoning was because the two items in the motion requesting them coming here, they said is not relevant to their company. They do not, it said, Starlight has never received any federal loans, including those for the purchase of rental properties, and Starlight Investment is not seeking to evict any residents from 71, 75, and 79 Thorncliffe Park Drive, which was the substance of why they were requested to appear.
Okay, so with that in mind, I would ask Ms. Cirillo if she has information that would show otherwise, because that's a pretty definitive statement to say that there's no federal involvement. However, I'd want to give Ms. Cirillo the opportunity to respond to what they have said. And at the same time, I don't know if colleagues are open to this, but as I speak here, perhaps there's an opportunity for the company to appear as part of the study on an existing, as part of a panel of witnesses. We would still be able to hear from them. I don't know if, I just canvassed that idea as again, I speak.
Okay, before Madame Chabot had her hand. Madame Chabot?
Peut laisser Madame Zarillo répondre, bien sûr.
Well, I should let Madame Zarillo respond, of course. But quite honestly, there are perhaps businesses that are not in conformity. I'm trying to understand the objective here. We're doing a study on housing, and I hope that this is going to be a constructive community because we're trying to find solutions. I don't think, I mean, we could find lists of other people, even if I don't know who they are. What is this going to bring us in a committee to force them to appear to find out whether they do this or they do that? How is this going to be helpful for the study of this particular committee looking at the issue of housing? I think that the witnesses we've heard today have given us various avenues to look at how to remedy the housing crisis. I do not see the point of this motion, so I'd be definitely against it, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cirillo, you can respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the clarity. I'll start with Madame Chabot's concerns there and questions. And I think what we've heard in this testimony is that there's been a shift from home ownership in this country to rental housing, which we know has happened over the decades, and especially as housing prices increase. And we know that rental housing is an important factor. And we heard testimony today that there is an opportunity for the government to intervene into rental housing and make that happen. So I think that it's important and it's relevant to the study that we dig into rental housing. I did want to address the letter that came back from Starlight, and I'm actually on a site right now, renex.ca. There's some of their properties that are for sale, and here it says properties in the portfolio of Starlight have in place financing at fixed below market interest rates, of which a significant portion is Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp insured. The $425 million in CMHC debt with a weighted average 2.52% interest rate and remaining terms of 4.2 years is assumable subject to lender consent. So I think, I think we need to get some clarity on what's published. Starlight themselves has highlighted, even in some of their own press releases that they have subsidies backed with public money. They're also, it's been widely reported about their evictions. It's been reported by CBC, CTV, The Hills Times, City News, Maclean's, and more. And if I had the time to pull it up, Mr. Speaker, I could share with you a story from CBC recently about some of their tenants being on a strike and how Starlight has potentially served notice to some of their tenants. So I think all of these issues can be clarified when the organization comes to committee, when Mr. Drimmer comes to committee.
Thank you. Ms. Gray on Madame Cirillo's motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be brief, that I think it's a reasonable suggestion to have that organization come as on part of the panel for this study. We have 2 more meetings, and certainly that could be the witness that is the NDP witness that is at one of those meetings. So we think that that's very, very reasonable.
Okay, with that, we have to deal with the motion of Madame Cirillo. So, see no further discussion, Mr.
Amendment there. Right.
I didn't hear an amendment.
Okay, well, one of us is going to put forward an amendment. If someone's agreeing, then I would propose, Chair, to ensure that we do have the company come here, which I know is important to Ms. Cirillo. I know the company has a different view, but still it would be, I think, important for a colleague to ask questions of the company, and they could do so if the company comes and participates as part of a panel of witnesses as part of this study. So that would be I propose that amendment, Chair. I move that amendment.
That's great. We're now on the amendment of Mr. Freitas-Kattos.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify for the amendment would you be also removing the part about summoning then? Or because the motion is actually to summon, so are you removing the part just to clarify that that's actually summoning? Because we're going from, being asked to come to committee. There hasn't been any additional letters. There hasn't been an order, and the motion is actually going right to summoning. So I just want clarification if part of that amendment was to remove the summoning part.
Yes, that would be removed as well.
Okay. Thank you. To suspend for a moment while the clerk gets this clear. Suspend. thank you for requesting that clarification. I'm going to go back to Mr. Fragascatos to read clearly into the record the amendment that he proposes.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies to colleagues. I think we all know how this works. Sometimes on the fly, and you don't put the words together as well as you could hope. Apologies also to the clerk. So, in any case, the exact wording is as follows: I move that, pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A, the committee request. So the word "summon" is dropped. The CEO of Starlight Investments, Daniel Drimmer, to appear before the committee by June 20th, 2024, as part of a panel of witnesses with regards to the study on federal housing investments for the duration of the panel.
Okay, it's clear to members. It's clearly in the record, the amendment of Mr. Fragascatos. Seeing no desire for discussion on the amendment, I will call a recorded vote on the amendment of Mr. Fragascatos to the motion of Ms. Zerillo.
Mr. Fragascatos?
Yes.
Mr. Long? Yes. Mr. Collins? Yes. Mr. Coteau?
Yep.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Falk?
Yes.
Mr. Tochor?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Madame Chabot?
Non.
Ms. Zerillo?
No.
Yeas pour 9-9, nays contre 2-2.
We're now moving to vote on the motion as amended. Clear? So, clerk, record a vote on the motion of Madame Zerillo as amended.
Mr. Fragascatos?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Falk?
Yes.
Mr. Tochor?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Madame Chabot?
Non.
Ms. Zerillo?
Yes.
The motion of Madame Zerillo has been accepted. With that, the committee will suspend while we transition to in-camera for committee business for the duration of the meeting. Suspend for 2 minutes while we transition. Suspend.